Hello, welcome. This is Joe Peters from MomFit with Joe Peters. Welcome to the Spanglish World Network and the Herd Network on Single TV channels 250 and 251. Please remember to download the Single TV app on the respective app stores in iOS and Android devices. While you are downloading, make sure to rate and leave a comment. The app is free. Single TV is also available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire, Fire TV, Roku, and Roku Stick in all smart TVs since 2016. Welcome to this episode of MomFit. I am super excited because I know that this is going to be one of those episodes that is going to be life changing for all of you that are watching us around the world. I have the pleasure honor to have here with me. And Yeve is a Zimbabwe native who calls the US a home. She's a wife, a mom, an attorney, a public speaker, and an author. She is the founder of Philisa Creatives, a media company that celebrates and amplifies African heritage. Philisa, which means to bring to life in the Billy creates innovative products to enhance multicultural learning. Her debut publishing book, my first book of Shauna and the Billy, that Yeve will have to correct me because I'm completely sure that I'm not saying that right, is available in her website, felisacreative.com. Yevi says, African children, I love this, and this is one of the things I'm so excited. African children's books are not for African children's. They are for all children's. Books are important tool in documenting culture, history, and language. Tibanda believe that we have to normalize, celebrate, and learn about other cultures to build a truly global, diverse society. As such, her brand focused on amplifying diversity, equity, and inclusion that really matters. So, Jevi, thank you so much for being in the MomFit show with us. I know that is a very special episode because right now, moms around the world, either pregnant moms or moms with babies, are all thinking about that. Are thinking it doesn't matter if they are um, Latinas, Afro
Mhm.
American, Asian, Caucasian. This is a topic that is getting more and more important as we see in the world how polarities are starting to pull. So I'm really excited for you to share with us your wisdom. It's going to start with your story and what happened in Jeve's life to actually ignite this desire to change the world through children's books to help our children to validate and respect and understand the magic of diversity.
First, thank you so much for having me. I am so excited to be here on Mom Fit with you. This is an incredible honor for me. I'm so excited to connect with all of your viewers across the world. So, thank you for having me. It's really my pleasure. So, I'll start with a little bit of telling you my story, and you touched on it a little bit in my bio. So my name is Yeve. I am a Zimbabwean native, as Joe said. I have been in the U.S. for more than half of my life, and when I first arrived in this country to study, I came for college when I was 16. Um, I thought that I had a pretty good sense of who I was at 16. I'd grown up in Zimbabwe. And coming here, I realized that actually I was still, at 16, as most teenagers are, you're still kind of finding yourself, right? But I was now doing that in a different country, in a different culture. And I think college is really when I started. It sounds funny to say, but when I started really connecting with my heritage in a way that I hadn't before, because I had to appreciate it more being outside of it, right? And so I found myself just so drawn to music that I when I was in Zimbabwe wouldn't listen to, for example. And so I think that was a pivotal time for me of really trying to, on one hand, assimilate into American culture, on the other hand, hold steady and hold true my heritage and my beliefs, right? Um, and growing up in Zimbabwe, I took it for granted, right, that I would have the language, access to the food, and all these things that suddenly, when I came here, obviously I didn't have that, right? And so it took a lot for me to kind of realize, wait a minute, like this is who I am, and I should embrace it, and I should, really dig deep. And so at 16, that's when that started. And fast forward, I completed college, started working, etc. And fast forward to when my husband and I were pregnant with our daughter, um, in 2018, and we're starting to think about, okay, what is it that we want to instill in our child? What is it that we want her to know and understand about where she's from and all of that? And my husband also happens to be from Zimbabwe, and so we had a shared understanding and a shared desire for our daughter to know that she was Zimbabwean and to understand the heritage and the languages, and we knew that she would have no issues with the American side, right? Being first gen American, she would have no issues there because there's lots of resources for that in the country, right? To understand American history, African American history, etc. And so we started going on the search looking for Zimbabwean books and couldn't find them, could not find what I thought were quality books. And after a search, I just decided, you know what? Let me write my own. Let me write my own book to impart what I want my child to know, to impart what I wish I had when I was growing up. A book that celebrated me and that taught me a little bit about where I was from. So that's kind of the story to how I got here. And we can dig in more.
I love it. And actually, I love it because the reality is never before in life we had such a globalized culture where we have, like, if we're thinking about 50 years ago, 100 years ago, the people that were moving from one country to another were very limited because there were big boats, big things. But now it's more and more common that we have these nomad lifestyles where we are actually, like, I love how I call it, like citizens of the world, where not only our generation but our kids generation are growing in this borderless mindset of I can live whatever I want. And I resonate with what you are saying because for me it was the same. I'm from Colombia. I moved to the United States when I was 28, and I never appreciate my heritage and my roots as much as when I came here and I was facing by myself to a new culture, a new way to live, unfortunately in some cases racist and criticized. So I resonate with that, and how we can bring that respect and honor for different cultures. And one of the things that I want to talk with you is several things. The first one is, in your experience and your opinion, it is ever too early to start introducing those things? And what you will be your advice, for example, for a pregnant mom or for a newborn mom? I will tell you what I did, but I'm not an expert on that like you are. I always speak to my baby in Spanish, even when he was in my belly. And now that he's with us, unfortunately, my husband is a gringo, so I have to speak a little bit of English so the three of us can interact. But when I'm interacting with my baby, I'm only speaking Spanish on the hope that he can start appreciating that he is Latino. And then I actually had somebody telling me, well, he's not Latino. He was born here and he is like the literally clear Caucasian. He's like super white, blonde, reddish hair. And then I was like, uh, yes, you bet that he's Latino. And he is going to grow up as a Latino. So I want to ask you about that, and that you share your wisdom with these moms that are in that either they are in a different country,
Mm-hmm.
uh, or they are in the same country, but they have that desire to make sure that their kids grow up with that sense of diversity and inclusion.
Wow, that is first, thank you for sharing your story. The immigrant experience, even if we come from different countries, it's a shared experience, right? And so thank you for sharing that. That's really great to know that someone else was going through that too. Um, but yeah, I think one thing I will say at the outset, because I get this question a lot, and I'd like to say that there is no right or wrong answer, right? And I think it can feel very daunting, especially when you're in the diaspora. So when you're not in your native country, to think, oh my gosh, the burden of relaying my culture, my language, my heritage is all on me. That's a lot, and that's overwhelming, right? It's overwhelming, especially because as a mom, like you're if you're pregnant, you're about to bring life. If you already have the child, it's like now you're taking care of a human and trying to keep that human alive, right? It's a lot. And so I want to take the pressure off, first of all, and say it is not all on you. It isn't all on you. Okay. You are a conduit, just as in the same way that you are not solely responsible for making sure that your child knows everything about everything, right? Like they're going to get other sources of information from school, friends, relatives, in media, all of that. And I think that's the same kind of thinking we should have when it comes to culture, and heritage, and all of that. So I want to say that at the outset. That said, there are some things that you can do that will ensure that you kind of take the load off, and also that you set your child up for success. So I love what you said, Joe, about talking to your baby when you were pregnant and talking in Spanish. Listen, I did the same thing. I not only talked to my child, I would sing, I would do all the things that I do now, right? Affirmations. I did all of that when I was pregnant. And I like to say that the day that I went into labor is because I was having a conversation with my daughter when I was telling her that we're ready for her. And that night, that's when I started labor. And so I believe there's power in that, right? You can read while you're still pregnant. And so there's a lot of ways to connect with your child. I do believe that all of that is impactful. And I will talk about resources and the types of resources in a second. And then once the baby is born, my approach, and this is not something that anyone taught me, I kind of just from learning and reading, this is kind of what I decided to do and how we decided to raise our child from the get go. I wanted my child to be empowered and to be able to communicate and to know that when she communicated, she would be respected for that, right? We would listen and we would respect her from the moment that she was a baby, right? And I remember people telling me, especially when I traveled back to Zimbabwe with my newborn, people saying, you talk to her like she can understand you. And I said, yeah, she can. She can. She can understand me. I do believe she can. And I want to be able to understand her and know that I want to hear her. Right. And that's the philosophy that I carry as a parent now. My daughter's almost 4, and she will tell you, hey, I'm not done talking, you know? And so this belief that our children can understand us. Our children are human from the moment they get here, right? From the moment they arrive, they want to communicate. And so allowing and giving that space. And so what did I do? I taught myself baby sign, and I was teaching my child, right? And teaching her from the beginning, teaching her how to communicate, right? More. Exactly. All of that, right? And I was so, I think part of the issue when you start to communicate with a newborn is they're not receptive. And you're like, wait, this is a waste of time. But I just kept doing it. And then she started communicating back at one point, right? She started picking it up, and it was awesome. And I think my husband, who was a little bit like of a skeptic of like, wait, baby sign, like, is she really going to pick that up? And then he started seeing that she's communicating, right? And from an early age, again, speaking our languages to her. So Shona is my native language. My husband speaks Shona and Ndebele. The two of them are the primary languages in Zimbabwe. And so we have this, blend in our family where we have Shona and Ndebele. And so from a young age, we were teaching her those languages. And also from a young age, we would start to introduce our food to our child. And so I think that's another way that you can connect with your heritage, right? Is from a very young age, cooking meals. Once your child is tolerating solids, cooking meals and letting them understand and know what that food is. So I have this on my one of my social media pages. I have this video of my daughter when she was probably a year and some change. Whenever she was like talking, um, and she's eating. Her dad is feeding her, and they're eating sadza, which is our native dish in Zimbabwe. It is a staple, and it's made out of corn, and you eat it with your hands. And he's eating that, and he's feeding her, and she's trying to say sadza, and so she's like saja, saja, from that age, right? And so it's like that is also a way that you introduce culture and heritage and language, actually, right? You don't have to think of, oh my gosh, now I have to impart, in some cases, the limited language that you have. And you have to impart it onto your child. And how are you going to do that? You can do that through food. Do that through food, right? And so that's another way. And then let's talk about when the kids are a little bit older. So far we've talked about you're pregnant, what can you do, right? Talk to your child, right? Read to them. We've talked about, okay, now they're born. Let's say it's a newborn. What can you do? Baby sign, introduce food, and again, continuing with the reading as well, right? And continuing with the language. So now they're a little bit older. Now you've got a toddler that's running around. How do you introduce culture and heritage and language? Now, thankfully, other than like 4 years ago, there is a lot of media out there where you can find, even with African languages that are not mainstream, like Shona and Ndebele, there are so many channels now on whether it's YouTube, Instagram, of people who are either writing books or creating shows in these languages, right? And so there's so much more at our disposal now that we can use, and that's in our arsenal. And so I would encourage you to search and see if you can find, whether it's a cartoon or whatever. Maybe there's someone who does lessons online. I know that there are people who do that for certain African languages, right? Certainly for Spanish, I mean, there's a plethora of resources, for example, right? And so tapping into that so that it's, again, not all on you, tapping into those resources. And then I always say, whenever you're teaching a child a language, especially when it's not in the dominant language in wherever you live. So for example, with me teaching Shona and Ndebele, you have to make it fun, right? Because you remember that it's something that is different from what they're hearing day to day, in the world, in media, at school, if they're at school and daycare. And so it is something that you kind of have to introduce in a fun way. And for me, what I did with my child, once she was a toddler, she was, learning how to count, right? Learning how her ABCs. And so I introduced the languages then, right? We're counting and let's say we're going up or down the stairs. We would count in English because that's what she's learning at daycare. And then I would say, okay, now let's do it in Shona. And we would count, right? And that's just what we did. And I personally, because I am such a believer in the power of language, I also introduced my child to French and Spanish. Even though I am not fluent, I introduced her to French and Spanish, the language, the words that I knew, right? I studied French, and so I had a little bit more French than Spanish. But at one point, my child was learning Shona, Ndebele, French, and Spanish. Of
And
course,
sign language.
and sign language and English, right? I say this because it really, really made a difference later, and I'll come back to that. And so, like I was saying, introduce language in a fun way, right? Don't make it like, oh, this is a lesson. You're baking in the kitchen. Well, let's start talking, and saying what bread is in Shona, chingwa, as we're making. Oh, you want a slice of chingwa? You know what I mean? And so you can mix it up like that. And I recall with my child, there were times where there were words where she didn't know the English words. of certain things because I had just told her the Shona, for example. And so there were certain animals that she wasn't seeing on a day to day. And so that's how it helped me because I'm like, okay, you don't see lions every day. And so lion, you're going to know the first time you hear the word lion, it's actually going to be Shumba, which is Shona for lion. And so for a long time, she would say Shumba and she wouldn't say lion because I hadn't taught her that. And so as they're older, really, I think the emphasis is on making it fun. And at that stage, you also should and can utilize your village, right? And by that, I mean, if you are in, like me, in the US, where I don't live in a Shona community, I don't live in a Zimbabwean community, but I have lots of Zimbabwean family and friends around the world that I can connect with, right? Like my mom, for example. We have the ability to connect via WhatsApp and we can do video calls. And so utilizing them as a resource and saying, hey, let's do a video call and let's speak in Shona for 20 minutes, right? Utilizing that arsenal that you have, right? Again, it's not all on you. And so that's what I would say. As
I love that, and I'm gonna pause there so everybody can grab all the golden nuggets that Gervais giving you. First one is that is never that too early to introduce your child. So if you are a mom to be, start doing the things that you love with speaking to your baby, singing like Yeve was saying. One of the things that I did was because I'm Colombian, I love dancing. So I will just put my Colombian songs and I will dance with that big belly and I will just have fun having that part of the music. So first thing that she said is since the beginning. Then the second one, and I love how aligned we are on this, is the use of language and the use of sign language. One of the reasons, and I think, and I would love to have your opinion as well, I think that this is important for all babies because it reduces frustration, it reduces tantrums because you are actually give the babies are able to connect their body much earlier than what they are to process words. So when you give them a way to communicate with you, then you are actually helping them to reduce their frustration because now they know that they, even if they cannot say more, they can say more and then you will get it. And then one thing that I love about that with you that you were saying is that paradigm and that taboo of, oh, and you don't know how much pushback I had on this one. They were like, oh, you are teaching him Spanish and sign language and English. That is why he's not talking because he's so confused. He's 14 months and he's not talking. He's signing a lot, but he's not talking because he's confused. And you will not believe how many moms I found, I believe, a little too late. And I hope that you and me on this episode can reverse that for a lot of mom before happened, that they had the advice from the kindergarten or the daycare or the school to stop teaching their children their language because the children were getting confused. So my opinion is the teachers were just lazy and didn't want to handle a child that was saying a word like shuba that they didn't knew. And unfortunately, moms didn't have the knowledge and a support like yours to tell them, that is your right and it's okay. So I think that is lovely that your child was learning 7 languages at the time. And that I want to ask you, I am 99.9% sure that the answer would be no, but that didn't impact her development and then she was not confused, and if anything that gave her even more in life with everything that she learned in those early ages. So pregnant, talk with them, toddlers, start interacting. And one that I love, and actually I'm guilty of this, so I am taking your advice right now, is making it fun. Because the reality is I was hearing you and I was like, that is phenomenal because as more you make it fun, as more they're going to want to interact with you on this. So I love, love, love that. And I love how you are saying later on how you can interact into, and I want to hear your opinion on this, but when you were talking about the lion and the shuba, I also think like that will also make it a very special connection, that they are words that they are unique for them, that they are just words that I can just share with mommy and daddy, and I know that nobody else will know. So I will say that even create that additional bond on a relationship. So with that being said, and I love the part of relying in your village, because the reality is, when you are living in a place that is not your home, sometimes you don't feel that you have a village.
Mm-hmm.
So I love that idea of thinking, who can help me? Okay, I'm gonna
Mm-hmm.
make a play date for them to just listen. So
Mm-hmm.
I want you now go a little deeper into that, and then have your feedback as the expert on how a mom can put healthy boundaries around her decision to bring her culture and diversity into his or her child,
Mm.
against school saying you need to stop teaching Spanish because you are confusing me. Instead of, sometimes, unfortunately, in-laws that are like, oh, you cannot teach her that because then I cannot communicate with her. And people that unfortunately don't have enough knowledge on what are the benefits of this. So how these moms can be a little more proactive and creating some healthy boundaries to
Yeah.
know that what they're doing is right and they're doing the best for their.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, wow. Such a good one, because it's a struggle, right? I think, first of all, let's just acknowledge that once you're a mom, you are constantly having to establish healthy boundaries. Forget about culture and language and heritage, right? Like, people have opinions about everything, about how you feed your child, what the child is wearing, whether the child is tired, whether the child needs more food. Like, and so you're constantly having to deal with that, right? And so, first, let's just acknowledge that. And it's hard. And I get that. Like, for example, if you are in the diaspora like me, and you are around other people who either are fellow Zimbabweans who did not do that for their children, or non Zimbabweans for me, right? Who are like, well, why would you teach your child that? It's hard, because you're like, this is yet another thing I have to fight about or argue about or whatever. And it's very easy to kind of resign and say, you know what? Let me just give this up, because I have so many other things I'm trying to figure out. I can tell you, for me, as an immigrant, right, raising a first gen Black child in America, like, there is a lot that I think about when it comes to parenting my child, right? And so it's very easy, and I would not fault someone for saying, you know what, adding an additional thing on my plate that I have to fight about, it just doesn't make sense for me. So I understand that, and I want to give whoever might be feeling that way a little bit of grace, and also encouragement to say you're not alone. And there are seasons, right? There are seasons in life, and you might be in a season where maybe in that season you take the pressure off of yourself and say, you know what? I don't have to teach my child the ABCs and one, two, threes and all the animals in my language right now. I don't have to do that right now, and I can pick it up at another time. So that is perfectly okay. I am going to put my computer charger on so I don't lose you guys.
Please do that. And as you do that, one of the things that I love what Gervais do is saying, that is something that we as moms need so much, and is, remember that we first and most need to show ourselves grace. And that this, even though is a beautiful gift that we can give our children, by no meaning should become a burden in our
Exactly.
motherhood journey. And it is okay, mama, for you to say, you know what? I'm going to plan that instead of all this, I'm going to plan to do a sabbatical year when he is 7 years old, and we're going to spend a full year in Colombia, and he's going to learn his Spanish then. That is absolutely perfect as it is that I choose to talk to my baby in Spanish and he was pregnant, and as perfect as what Jeve was talking about, talking with her baby about 7 languages at the same time. It's not a competition, mama. It's about you doing what is right for you and your child, and find joy and pleasure on the journey. Go ahead, Jeff.
Excellent. Thank you so much. You're hitting the nail right on the head. So I'd like to talk now about, okay, the healthy boundaries that you can establish. I think one misconception that's out there is, if you are introducing, or when you are introducing a child to whatever it is, that is all the child will know. We don't give kids credit, right? It's like, oh, if I am a Zimbabwean and I pick up a Spanish book and I introduce that to my child, they're now only going to know Spanish and they won't know the Zimbabwean, aspect. Or if you pick up my book, right? If you pick up my book and say, okay, you know what? I want to teach my child Shona and Debele. Now they're going to forget the Spanish and they're going to forget Colombia. Like, that's not how the mind works. That's not how children work. Give them credit, just as you are knowledgeable about multiple things, so they too can have that capacity, right, to be knowledgeable about multiple things. So that's why I always say African children's books are not for African children, they're for all children, right? My book, for example, is not a book that is just for Zimbabwean children and that is the category and that's it. This book can be enjoyed by other children because books serve as windows and mirrors. And what does that mean? It means that if you are a Colombian, right, and you are raising your child here in the US like Joe is, you can pick up another book, my book or any other book from a different country or a different language. And what does that do for your child? What does that do? It shows them a window into another world, another heritage, another culture, another language. And you start teaching them to, one, appreciate that other people are celebrating their own heritage and they have their own languages. You're teaching them that at a young age. And not only are they seeing, oh, this is different from what we do, but it also teaches them that there are lots of similarities, right? You will pick up this book and you will realize, oh, wow, look at this picture. They're, driving a car just like we drive a car here, right? Like things that are we take for granted, but things that we know people are ignorant about. I will tell you, as a 16-year-old coming here to the US for college, moving to South Carolina, people ask me questions like, did we wear shoes? Did we drive cars? Did we listen to music? Right? Did I learn English on the flight over here? Right? And so that is an example of how limited knowledge and limited access to another culture, another country, right, makes you ignorant about how other people are living. And books are such an amazing way to teach our children that, right? And so I think what you can do to establish a healthy boundary is to introduce the people who are pushing back on you teaching whatever your language is or whatever aspect of your culture, and say, hey, listen, I understand what you're saying, but I have chosen to teach my child Shona because it's important to me that they are exposed to Shona, not for them to become, a Shona master and like be so fluent, but for them to understand and appreciate it. And here is a book that I'm using to do that. And you expose them because oftentimes it is based in their own ignorance and their own limiting beliefs that they're now imparting on you, right? And so someone thinks, oh, you know what? I couldn't learn another language now and it'll be confusing. But it's like, no, here's the way that I'm doing it and here's what works. So you can do that with books. You can do that with TV shows, right? We love Dora the Explorer. Like we love Dora, right? And Dora is speaking Spanish. And that is just another way to introduce and to be like, hey, listen, Spanish is cool, right? And look at what Dora's doing, right? And exposing my child to all of these things so that she has an appreciation. And so I think just educating the people who are pushing back on the benefits and also showing them the resources that you're using. And maybe if they're family, getting them involved as well and making them feel like they're part of this, right? I have people, for example, who use my book with family members. So I have friends who, let's say they're Zimbabwean and their spouse is American. They use the book with their in-laws who are American to help them to be able to connect as well and say, okay, now you are also learning Shona and Debele as our child is learning, and you can learn together, right? And it's just another resource. So I think one way to push back or to respond to people who are saying, why are you doing this, is to one, explain the benefits, two, involve them and show them the resources that you're using, right? And if, like I said, if they're family, you can actually include them if they're open to it, right? And three, I think when it comes to school, this is a tricky one because obviously, the school is where your child is going and all of that. But one thing I have found to be so helpful is to donate books to the school and to say, here are some books that we read at home, right? And in my case, I've donated my book to every classroom my daughter has been in and said, hey, here's this book. And obviously pre-COVID times, it would be, I've never done this because my child was growing up during, COVID times, those 2 years. But before, I know that it wasn't uncommon for parents to go and read books in the kids' classroom, right? As things open up now, that's something that you can do. So you could take a book, right, from your country with your language or whatever it is, right? So in my case, I could take my book and read it to the kids, right? That's an additional way to expose and say, hey, listen, this is our language and this is our book about our culture. I will come and teach and, spend time with the kids doing that. And I also think, going to talking about school, talking with the teachers themselves and having a one-on-one conversation and explaining why it is important to you, similar to what we just said above, right? Like teaching people, hey, this is why it's important, showing them resources, doing that on a one-on-one basis with the teacher, and sharing with them. And I can tell you, as someone, like I said, who was teaching my child all of these languages at any given time, it has been so beneficial to her. It's been so beneficial to her that when she's 3 right now, turning 4, but they started learning Spanish at their preschool. And it's a class of like 20 something people, some native speakers or parents who are native speakers. And my daughter was doing so well in Spanish that the teacher said, do you all like speak Spanish at home? Like she is doing incredible. She's the best student in the class. And I said, listen, we have been teaching her little Spanish. We've exposed her to Spanish, music, shows, etc. on TV. And now at this age, she just has a natural like curiosity about it, a natural, she picks up on it. She picks up on languages very quickly now, right? So much so, like I said, that she is one of the best Spanish students in the class. And when I explained to the teachers our method, they said, oh, it makes sense. It makes sense because her just language abilities are great. People think she's much older because she can communicate so well and she's very articulate, right? And I don't attribute that to me being such an amazing parent, an amazing mom. I attribute that to her from a very young age, knowing that she could and was empowered to communicate and had the tools to do that, right? And
I
so
love that. I love that. And one of the things that I love, and I want to know, I want everybody to know, if you ever had somebody telling you you're going to confuse your baby if you speak more than one language, or in the case of Jeve, six, there are research that are showing that the inflection point on language in the brain is three.
yeah,
You have one, the second one is a little challenging, especially as older you go. Then the third one is a little easier, and then after you get three languages, all the other ones are just, your brain is just a sponge. Your brain is just like, bring out the next one, bring one the next one, bring one the next one. So instead of having that reaction from fear of I'm gonna confuse my baby, if you know this information that Jeff is sharing or I'm sharing you about the brain, you can see it as a gift for your baby and sound like, if he or she is used to it and comfortable with not only my language, but I love what she was saying about exposing them to other languages. Even if you are not fluent, I'm not fluent in Portuguese, but I love Portuguese. And now I'm gonna start talking to my baby on my broken Portuguese based on what I just hear from Jeve, because then it all is not only about our own culture, but it's about, I think, our responsibility. That is the responsibility. I love that word, taking responsibility, because it's the ability to respond, to make sure that our children grow in a world of understanding of inclusion and of understanding of different doesn't mean bad, different doesn't mean risky. Different is beautiful, because I agree with you. Like, I also have some of those traumas when I came. That, like, I remember one of my closest friends from Brazil came in from high school, and they literally asked him how he get here, because in Brazil they will not have planes. And then he just kind of laughed and said, like, "Oh no, I just came swimming." And then for a long time they really believed, of course he was a teenager, so for a long time they really thought that the only way to come was that. So I think that is part of our responsibility as moms, to expose our children to that diversity, to that inclusion, especially now where we are having so much hate in the world, when we are having so much polarity, where we are having some of these extreme mindset people breaking apart our children and our communities. How we, as I call female goddesses, can actually bring back that glue from the way that we raise our children. And I love how your message is beyond culture. It's not just, oh, this is something that you need to do if you are Zimbabwe, or you are Colombian, or you are Asian and you are living in America. This is something that you, as a native North American mom, we invite you to explore with your child, so you actually also bring them into this world of diversity, into this world of differences, so that when they see in a school or in the mall children that are different, they don't get just surprised because they are never been exposed to it, but they actually have the tools to process in their brain those things, different accents. So I just love, love, love that, Jave. One other thing that I want to go deeper with you on that is how we can work, and I will do 180. First, with our children, if we are raising them with diversity on culture, because we have a multicultural family like yours or mine, how we can help them to create that strong self-esteem and confidence, that they actually feel proud of saying, I am Latino. I don't care what you said, I am a badass Latino. So from our children, how we do that, and then for the children of, or the friends of our kids, how we help them to actually grow into that admiration and respect for that difference culturally,
Mhm.
versus that pointing out of you are different. One of the things that, and I would love if you have something like this happen with your baby girl, but one of the things that touched me a lot was seeing the reaction of baby girls around the world with the new mermaid. I'm gonna get emotional. Mermaid trailer, because it's our responsibility to make all of them feel that they fit in. It's our responsibility to make sure that they all feel that they are represented, that they are part of what is important, what is magical, what is beautiful, what is wonderful. So, how we help our own and how we help those that are around our own to go into this journey together.
You and I could talk about this for so many hours. I wanted to, before I answer that, I want to touch on what you were talking about with language and say, in addition to your brain's capacity to learn multiple languages, also language learning actually expands your brain such that you can absorb other subjects. People who learn multiple languages are skilled in STEM, for example. And I think we know some polyglots, so, some celebrities who are polyglots. And it just enhances your brain's ability to think quicker as well. And so there are actual health benefits to learning different languages, multiple languages. And it's actually key to do so at a young age, because the older you get, the less malleable your brain is. And so if you tried to learn a language, if you or I tried to learn a language today, we would do it, but it would be challenging. Our kids are in a better place to be able to do that. And so that's another thing to take into consideration, and something to use in your counter to people who say, well, why are you doing this? Now, to answer your question about how do we get our children to celebrate and to feel confident in who they are, you touched on it and said representation matters, right? And listen, the we know that children's literature, for example, the most things that are represented in children's literature are animals. After animals, then it's white characters, right? And so there is a huge gap in children's literature, and buying more books that represent who they are. They're books about language, culture, etc. That is one way to do that, right? And have your child, just as you said about Ariel, be able to see, hey, that looks like me. You know, so many children had that reaction to the Michelle Obama portrait. Hey, she looks like me, right? And so representation matters. And I believe in affirmations. I do affirmations with my daughter, and I do them as well when I'm teaching her the affirmations. And so we do those in the morning, we do those at night, and teaching her that she is a strong Black woman, right? And she is beautiful, and she is kind, and she is smart, all of those things, right? And so I think affirmations. And then teaching those children who are not ours, right? Remember, I said that books and literature and all of that are windows and mirrors. And so I think exposing them, as we've been talking about this whole show, exposing them to things that are not like them so that they can see, hey, there are lots of similarities in our difference, right? Exposing them to, I mean, Encanto did that, for example. The movie Encanto was an amazing way to celebrate your heritage, Colombian heritage, right? And children from all over love Encanto. And now they know, wow, there's a place called Colombia, right? And there's an abuela and all of this, right? And so doing more of that, exposing them to that, I think is the way to do that. And the more that we can have these conversations with women and moms around the world, the more we can start to change that, right? Because moms are the conduits, they're the ones who teach. Moms are the ones who teach children. And so it starts with us, and having these conversations and educating ourselves and opening up our children to have what we didn't have. That's what I would say.
I love it. And actually, one of the things that I was thinking, I'm gonna do it, and I'm inviting all the mamas that are watching this around the world to consider that, is go to Yeve's website. She's going to tell us about that in a little bit. And for Christmas, order just 10 of those books, 15 of her books, and just give that to your family and friends as a gift to them, and even maybe make a little note in the front page saying, the reason why I'm giving you this is because for me and my family is very important to have uh, our baby growing in a world that understands diversity. And I love this book because it's a proof of that. And what a beautiful way, like she was saying, I love what you say, like books are windows and doors, and how we can with books make sure that we are bringing back that part of not only allowing our babies to grow into that culture, but family and friends, and allowing them to see the possibilities of what the world is. I love what you were saying about affirmations. And one of the things that I love about that is that, again, being responsible, being able to respond. I think that as more we can put in our children that, and this is for all children, that confidence of within, of not waiting for somebody else to validate them, not waiting for external validation, even when, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this one, even when that external validation come from us, but sometimes even bite a little bit our tongue and develop inside of them that thing of, yeah, that external validation is nice, but I do not need it because my internal validation, my internal self worth, my internal self-love is enough, that I don't need anybody else to tell me that I'm beautiful or that I'm smart or that I'm good enough, because I know I am, just because I am. So I would love to touch that with you, that before we start closing the show.
Yeah, so I literally teach my daughter to give herself a hug, to tell herself she loves herself and to tell herself that she's proud of herself. I've been teaching her that for a while. And so now when she does something, I ask her, I say, are you proud of yourself? Because she needs to be proud of herself and do things for herself, not for me, right? Or her dad. And it's hard because at that age, they are looking to us for all of that validation. And there are times when we need to do it and affirm them. But like you said, we also have to empower them to know that they can do it, right? And so I'm constantly telling her that, you did this on your own. And there's also studies that say that instead of telling our children things like, oh, great job or good job, we can teach them and say, hey, you figured that out on your own, and you use your problem solving skills, or, whatever, being specific about what it is that they did so that they know for next time that, oh, problem solving, that's something that I can do, versus something that's more generic and vague, that like, oh, great job. Well, what did I do that was so great, So yeah, that's what I will say. I know we want to, move on to the next thing. So
Absolutely. I love that. And one of the things that I want to ask you as we wrap up, and I agree, I probably will figure out a way to bring you back because you are a huge source of wisdom. And I love the positive, empowering position that you are getting in the world and how you are changing the world with what you are doing and for next generations. And for now, if you could tell one thing to these moms that are watching us, these moms to be, or these moms that are in the fourth trimester, in the first year of life, what would be one advice that you could tell them to encourage them to go into this path of diversity, inclusion, and multicultural, and understand that it doesn't matter if they feel that applies directly to them, but how they can keep doing it.
so I just want to say to all the moms watching, just know that exposing your child to diversity, to different things, different cultures, opens up their world. It opens up their world in a way that you will never, ever be able to do by just limiting it to, the same thing. And the more we can expose our children, the more that you are creating for children like mine a better environment at school and in the future workplace, right? It would be so amazing if when my child says, hey, I went to visit Zimbabwe this summer, the kids in her classroom are like, oh, Zimbabwe, I know where that is, right? Instead of facing what I face, which is, where is that? And did you walk here? And all these types of questions, right? And so by you doing that and you exposing your child, you're actually creating a better environment for other kids, right? Because your kid now understands and you've opened up their world. And so I really encourage you to do that. It is fun, right? To learn about other places and other languages and other cultures. And guess what? We can travel. Travel is a huge thing that I believe in that we didn't talk about, but travel is one of the best ways to do that. And so I encourage it, and you are more than equipped to do that for your children. Just know that.
Thank you so much, Yvette. Thank you for being here with us. Before we go, please share with us your website where these mamas can go and order 10, 15 of your books to share with their family and friends.
Thank you so much, Joe, for having me. It's been a pleasure. I've had such an amazing conversation with you. So my website is www.Philisa Creatives, and Philisa is Philisa Creatives, Creatives. You can buy the book there. It's also available on Amazon. If you search my first book of Shona and Debele words, you can search using my name, Yeve, Yeve. And yeah, buy it for the holidays, gift it. I know several people who do that, and they just buy for all their nieces and nephews, and family members. So, anytime you want to connect with me, I am available on Instagram, Philisa Creatives. That's the handle. We're also on Twitter, but I'm receptive, and I love talking with moms. It's one of my favorite things to do. So please reach out. And I really hope the book blesses you and is a source of fun, just as it is for my family.
Thank you so, so much, Yeve. This show can also be heard on the Spanglish Radio Network. Please check out www.spanglishworld.ca for all the news and programming. Spanglish World. Watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and leave it.